I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Israel has the right to do everything that it can to get those hostages back safe and sound.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water? Sir Keir?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right.
Yeah. How many more children in Palestine have to die before you call for a ceasefire?
I understand calls for a ceasefire at this stage. I do not believe that it is the correct position now.
In their first 100 days of government, the Labour Party have banned some arms sales to Israel, called for an immediate ceasefire, and recommitted to recognising the state of Palestine. But Keir Starmer has caused upset with his slow movement on these policies, and the timeline in which these ambitions will be achieved, or lack thereof, has left many sceptical over whether the PM's pledges will ring true. The call is even coming from within the party. At a fringe event inside Labour conference, we spoke to Chair of the Business and Trade Committee, Liam Byrne.
What a lot of people here want to see now is a timetable for recognition of Palestine. You know, we have now got many of our European neighbours that are now standing up that commitment. People in this room tonight, we're members of the Labour Party who want to see Labour actually deliver on that commitment just as soon as possible. There is obviously a clear and present risk that arms that the UK is selling risk human rights violations. And so the decisions that were taken by David Lammy and Johnny Reynolds are good, that is progress, but we've got to get to the bottom of why it's only a partial ban and not a full ban. It was pretty clear to us that ministers under the last government were basically sitting on the evidence. They were kind of, just trying to see no evil. They were covering their eyes to what was really going on. And I'm glad, frankly, that David Lammy and Johnny Reynolds have moved in the way that they have to take different decisions quickly.
We have condemned settlement expansion, settler violence, and unacceptable and extremist rhetoric, including calling out Israeli government ministers. In that first month, we withdrew the Tory government's challenge to the International Criminal Court. And we've undertaken a review of all arms sales to Israel and announced a suspension on a number of arms transfers. All of that goes to show the difference between 3 months of a Labour government and 14 years of Tory rule.
Under the pressure of the solidarity movement, the Labour Party has shifted its position. We remember, all of us, that in October of last year, Keir Starmer was saying that Israel had the right to cut off food, fuel and essential supplies to the people of Gaza as a means of self-defense. In other words, had a right to starve the Palestinian population. Since Labour's been in office, under the pressure of the movement, we've seen it take some positive steps, but nowhere near enough. But the framing of that, the sort of repetition of "we call for a ceasefire," which is the language they now use, is meaningless unless you're prepared to take action against the state that is making it clear it does not want to call a ceasefire until, in its words, it's finished the job, which means that continuing with the relentless bombing of Gaza and now a relentless bombing of Lebanon as well. We had politicians attending some of our events, but these were politicians who do accept the right framing and are prepared to articulate it. I didn't hear Angela Rayner's speech at Labour Friends of Palestine Middle East, but as part of the Labour leadership, I've not heard words from her that indicate that she wants real action, that she stands up wholeheartedly for the application of international law, that she stands against Israel's indiscriminate slaughter in Gaza, and that she's pushing within the government for a full arms embargo. I haven't heard any of those statements. So in a sense, it's not a question of politicians going onto platforms and attending events unless they are doing so in order to press the case for a change in government policy. So certainly PSC would not be inviting any politician onto our platform who is not going to be pushing for the right type of action that will change the fundamental dynamics of the oppression of the Palestinian people.
Palestine here, and we make sure that it is the case, is not a party issue. It's not a Labour issue or a Conservative issue or a Lib Dem issue. It's a UK issue. It's a British issue. Because it's an issue that has to do with the legacy and the role of Britain, the Balfour Declaration and the British Mandate of Palestine. It's an issue that has to do with the basic human rights that connects all these parties together. It's an issue that has to do with the international system and the international law and all the rules that we built together after the horrors of the Second World War. It's an issue that has to do with the UK's commitments and policies, be it Conservatives or Labour, towards the state of Palestine, the independence, the ending of occupation, the illegality of settlement. So we would like Palestine to continue to be a cross-party issue, if you may. However, Labour, we have had, as I started by saying, historic relations because Labour has values that we subscribe to, particularly the values of justice, be it social justice, be it human justice, the values of freedom and universality of our human rights, internationalism and accepting international law equally on all. All these values are our values. I can list for you many contradictions, including of late, this new government, the issue of the vote in the General Assembly. I mean, that was adopting the International Court of Justice advisory opinion, which was clear. The court came up with a crystal clear ruling opinion that Israel's continued presence in the occupied territory is unlawful, that Israel's settlements are all war crimes and must be dismantled and removed, and that all third parties must cease to provide any material, legal or political support to Israel's unlawful practices. And the UK government says that they support the ruling of the ICJ, they support this finding, but then when we offer them a chance to vote in it, they abstain. The contradiction is exactly the dividing line between politics and the political arena and the legal arena. And this is the work we are trying to do with the new government, is to stick all of us in the legal arena, on the legality of the situation, rather than politics, because in politics you have calculations. But the legal arena is very clear. So what we are saying all the time is we need one thing, the rule of law being applied on Israel, on us, on everybody. Especially that we have a Prime Minister who's a human rights lawyer, who was Attorney General here in the UK, who was an expert and dealt with the ICJ in his career. So he knows this very well, and I believe that he has a soft spot or support to some sort of internationalism and international system.
Around the country, activists continue to push the government for greater action to end Israel's bombardment of Gaza.
If you really want peace, you've got to show Israel that there are consequences to its killing and to its behaviour, to its apartheid occupation. Otherwise, they're just carrying on doing whatever they want. They go into the West Bank, they allow the settlers to harass and kill, and it's got to stop. I'll only think there's a commitment when they start actually acting to sanction Israel's behaviour. It's not enough. We've heard lots of fine words about stopping the settlers and all these sorts of things, and we need a ceasefire. But unless you back it up with sanctions, it's meaningless, absolutely meaningless. And the conference itself has stopped Palestine Solidarity from using the words genocide and apartheid, which is disgraceful.
Organisations who hold fringe meetings have the opportunity to have those advertised inside the official brochure of the conference. And what the Labour Party did, we sent them the details of the meetings and the title. One of them was entitled Justice for Palestine, Confronting Genocide and Ending Apartheid. And the party said they wouldn't accept the words genocide and apartheid, so simply advertised it as Justice for Palestine. Our answer to that is you cannot tackle an injustice unless you name it accurately. And we're not using those words lightly or pejoratively. The judgment that Israel is practicing the crime of apartheid has been affirmed by the International Court of Justice, by Amnesty International, by Human Rights Watch, by B'Tselem, Israel's leading human rights monitoring body, by the UN Special Rapporteur, is indicated in the resolution passed by the UN General Assembly. So there's a widespread acceptance that what Israel is doing meets the threshold of the crime of apartheid. You don't address that unless you name it accurately.
Once you apply legal assessment, then the decision becomes much easier. Does Israel violate the basic provisions of international law? And the answer is yes, with capital letters. And the Foreign Office knows it. The legal experts of the government now and the previous government know it. And therefore, once you come to that conclusion, then it becomes a legal obligation upon you domestically, by the domestic law and internationally, to immediately seize any exportation of arms to a country that is committing all these crimes.
Starmer's slow action is cut through to the wider public too.
I think it's all well and good to stand in a conference hall and make sweeping comments. They need to act on it. They've suspended 30 arms sales to Israel, which isn't anywhere near enough. We've seen horrific events in Lebanon over the last 48 hours. We've got more than 50 children have been killed. I'd love to know how many kids need to be murdered before this government actually act and say that what's going on over there is wrong.
Well, you saw Keir Starmer at the press conference saying that he wanted a ceasefire, and then somebody actually stood up and started shouting at him that he had done nothing to stop arms sales to Israel and to stop the sale of weaponry and ammunition and things like that. So it's just sort of a bit, do you know what I mean, like lacklustre from him, and it's not very representative of Liverpool generally and the Labour Party as a group. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people say the Labour Party under Keir Starmer has been moved to the centre or moved to the right. Is that something you'd agree with?
I'd say it's been like that since Tony Blair took power, generally, and even since Neil Kinnock became leader. Obviously he didn't become the actual Prime Minister, but ever since he became leader of the opposition, it shifted from being a socialist party to a sort of capitalist party with slight concessions for people.
What's the policy you think Keir Starmer should be pursuing?
I think the ceasefire policy is just completely lacklustre. Do you know what I mean? And he hasn't actually properly pursued it. And I think that it's such a contentious issue, and both sides of both of the main political parties basically have the exact same policies on it, which is quite concerning.
I just think it's absolutely dreadful, that whole situation, and Israel is just being put there by, America and the UK a long time ago to represent their interests there. So I suppose they feel obliged to keep backing them. But I mean, the people of Palestine, God help them, it's absolutely dreadful.
The political class here coalesced to actually, in a way, push for the Israeli narrative. And I remember very well, on the very same day, very same hour, the first statement that came out of the Foreign Secretary then, James Cleverly, was very poorly written, that I had to issue a statement and retweet it, saying that this will be interpreted by the Israeli fanatics in the Israeli government, and they have many fanatics, as you know, as a license to commit mass murder and mass destruction. And I warned every politician here to make sure that it's restrained and that any act has to be within international law. And that was one of the examples that I remember on the first hour, on the first day, how the first few days and weeks and months were absolutely horrible. But down the line, thanks to the British public, thanks to the stories being seen and the sheer murderous campaign by Israel exposed, unmasked, thanks to some of the alternative media like yours and many others, I think the British public have been the bedrock on which all these political actors have changed their position. And you've seen the streets of London and the streets of Manchester and in Scotland and in Wales and everywhere. And you've seen also the public opinion worldwide, not just in the UK, but the UK was an epicenter. And historic moments when you have almost 1 million in the streets of London in support and solidarity of Palestine. You've seen the real support within the Labour Party itself and the Labour movement, again going to the movement. You've seen all the real principled positions by many Labour MPs. So all that brought pressure that the position has been clarified. And now the Labour, before the elections, but also when they became government, called for an immediate ceasefire. But this is not enough, we tell them. Calling is something, but enforcing is something else. So enforcement needs building real leverage that we can place on Netanyahu and Israel to stop this madness.